Every corner of the world have their own specter roaming the lands. Sweden is no different. In the small village of Borgvattnet, there is a vicarage that is said to be the most haunted house in all of Sweden. Wanna hear a ghost story? Arguably the most famous haunted location in Sweden, Borgvattnet Vicarage was built in 1876. Located in an isolated corner of northeast Jämtland in a village of the same name, the first resident of the vicarage was a priest named Per Johan Strindberg, who lived there with his family. After him, many priests would call the village and the vicarage home, and for around 50 years, there were no reported sightings of any ghosts. But that would change in 1927, when Vicar Nils Hedlund was living there. It started off pretty small. One day he had been cleaning the house and he went upstairs to put away his laundry. When he arrived upstairs, he noticed how the clothes suddenly flew off the clothesline right in front of him. Then more events would happen. He would report hearing footsteps or feeling a presence whenever he was in one of the rooms. And it did not stop there. When Hedlund eventually left the vicarage, he was replaced by another vicar, Rudolf Tengden, who soon began having his own creepy experiences while staying at the vicarage. In 1930, he was reading in one of the rooms when he suddenly spotted a figure that was moving around in the dining room. Getting up to check, he spotted a woman dressed in grey. She walked slowly towards where he was before she turned and entered another room. Rushing after her into that room where he had seen her enter, he found nothing. There was no one there. Because of the way she was described, this particular figure would become known as the Grey Lady. Between the years 1936 and 1941, Otto Lindgren was the vicar staying in the vicarage with his wife, and it wouldn't be long before strange things started happening to them as well. Doors would open by themselves, followed by the sounds of footsteps moving around the house. One well-known example of this was when he and his wife were sitting in the dining room. They heard the front door open and followed by heavy footsteps that seemed to be headed towards the kitchen. Getting up to see who had come to visit them at that late hour, they found nothing. The door was open, but no one was there. The same thing would happen one night when the wife was alone downstairs and Otto was upstairs. She heard the door opening and closing, followed by footsteps that were headed towards the kitchen. But this event was a bit different, because not only did she hear the door open and close and footsteps, she also heard music just outside the front door. Finding this to be the oddest thing of all, she rushed over to the door to open it, but there was nothing outside, and the music had abruptly stopped. When her husband came down from upstairs, they would both hear the strange music. Neither of them could find anything, and the music would stop whenever they got close. The church did not address any of these rumors, but the story would still spread. In 1947, a journalist working at the Östersund County newspaper would hear of the rumored hauntings, and curious, he decided to take a deeper look at it. At that time, the priest staying at Borgvattnet was Erik Lindgren. When he was contacted by the journalist, he agreed to an interview, where he spoke of his own strange experience. Those experiences included hearing sounds that sounded like someone was dragging furniture across the floor, which should be impossible since Erik had just moved in to the vicarage and his furniture had not arrived yet, so the upper floor was completely empty. He would also hear footsteps and stomping on the small bridge outside of the yard, but whenever he looked, no one was there. He would also feel watched, or experienced the sensation of someone being close to him or even sitting next to him. But the worst and arguably most famous incident happened in 1945. One evening, Erik had been sitting in the rocking chair and reading a book. Suddenly, something seemed to take hold of the chair, causing it to rock harder and harder until it sent him violently tumbling to the floor. After getting up and convincing himself that he simply must have fallen, he sat back down in the chair again, only for the same thing to happen. During this entire time, he felt this weird unseen force behind him. At this point, his experiences were so frequent that he had begun keeping a list of every strange encounter. But that list got so long that he eventually just stopped and accepted that this was part of his life now. A priest openly speaking about hauntings caused quite the sensation. The story would spread fast, and it wasn't long before Borgvattnet gained a reputation as the haunted house, which in turn attracted people to the vicarage, from all over the country even. Many wanted to stay there and see these hauntings for themselves. And those who did stay there would report seeing strange things in the vicarage. Hearing footsteps, seeing invisible figures, doors that open on their own, strange lights that turned on and off by themselves. All of those were reported by people who stayed there. One of the most famous stories from a visitor comes from Secretary Inga Flodin, who stayed at the vicarage during a business trip in 1941. She had woken up in the middle of the night to the feeling of being watched. Looking around the dark room, she thought she saw 3 figures sitting and staring at her from a sofa that was opposite the bed. Thinking that she must be dreaming, she pinched herself, but the figures were still there. She then quickly turned on the lamp, only to find that the figures were still there. 3 ladies, one dressed in a black dress, another in a purple dress, and the third in a grey dress, which is believed to be the lady seen by Rudolf Tengden in 1930, 11 years prior. But despite the creepiness of this situation, what struck Inga the most was their expressions. They all looked so sad. The most melancholy of them was the grey lady, who had swollen, red-rimmed eyes and was knitting at the same time. But Inga did not feel any fear. The only thing she felt in that moment was confusion. Why were they there? Who were they? This confusion meant that she kept her eyes locked on these ladies until exhaustion claimed her, and she fell back asleep. When she awoke the next morning, the ladies were gone. This room has become known as the Weeping Room. People feeling a strange presence in the house, footsteps and the sounds of furniture being moved, music playing out of nowhere, strange figures appearing in rooms and disappearing. The vicarage is quite crowded, wouldn't you say? So let's recap the ghosts that we know. There is of course the Grey Lady, reportedly seen in 1930. The 3 crying ladies that Inga Flodin reportedly saw in 1941, one of which may be the same Grey Lady from 1930. But now we get to the more interesting ghosts that are said to be residing in the vicarage. The first stories of any weird things in the vicarage came from Nils Hedlund, and he has a very tragic tale attached to his hauntings, namely that of his mother, Märta Hedlund. She was the wife of priest Per Hedlund, who lived in the vicarage before Nils took over. Märta had died tragically at the age of 30 after giving birth. Per did not take the death of his wife well, and he struggled deeply with his grief. At the time of her death, it was technically spring, but it was still cold out and the ground was frozen, too frozen to try to dig a grave. This meant that Märta's body had to be stored in a room in the house, a room now known as the Yellow Room, arguably the most haunted room in the house, and it's said by some that she was kept in that house for a bit too long because he could not part ways with her in any shape or form, so her burial took some time. People who have stayed there have reported seeing shadows. There's also been those who theorize that maybe Märta is one of the crying ladies. Another ghost that is said to reside in the house is that of a young maid and her baby. You see, people who have stayed at the vicarage have also reported hearing very distressful sounds. There's a room in the house that is known as the Pink Room, and in that room, guests have reported hearing the sounds of a crying baby. They have also reported seeing what they thought was a small child running around the property. There is a legend that says that somewhere on that property there is a small infant buried. The legend goes that at the end of the 19th century, an unmarried maid gave birth. The child's father was rumored to be the priest staying at the vicarage at that time. As this would cause quite the scandal, the maid was hidden away until the child was born, and it is said that once the child was born, the priest buried it somewhere on the property. And because of this event, both the maid and her child haunt the vicarage. All of these ghosts would eventually draw the attention of another priest named Tore Forslund. In 1981, he offered to rid the village and the vicarage of this ghost problem. At this point, the haunted vicarage had become quite marketable, and there was a lot of people who sold miniature angels and devils in a village shop, and Forslund really disliked this. He felt that this was a sign of dark things happening in the village. His attempts at exorcising the ghosts of the vicarage was unsuccessful, and all it ended up doing was earning him the nickname the Ghost Priest, and shortly after he would leave the church altogether. As I mentioned, in 1981 there was a market for the haunted vicarage, and that's because in the 1970s a local entrepreneur named Erik Brännholm saw an opportunity. After acquiring the vicarage, he had the place transformed into a hostel, and he used the house's haunted reputation as a way to draw guests and customers. Overnight guests were given a certificate after their stay in the vicarage as evidence that they were brave enough to spend the night at the most haunted house in Sweden. And as I've mentioned throughout this video, guests staying at the vicarage have reported their own strange experiences. Today, the vicarage operates as a bed and breakfast, a cafe, as well as a restaurant. Because of this, as I mentioned in the video of Storsjöodjuret, there is a degree of skepticism that naturally appears whenever there is a monetary gain to be had. While the priests who lived there once may have been completely genuine in speaking of their experiences, you can't ignore the fact that today there is a vested interest in the vicarage keeping its reputation as the most haunted house in Sweden, because that will draw curious people to it. And then you have the added bonus of overnight guests getting a certificate of overnight stay as evidence of their bravery, which some say is just marketing. And those two things combined is why many believe that now it's just a hoax, a story that got out of hand. But even so, there are those who believe that it is truly haunted. And there are those who believe that while the priests were genuine, it is not genuine any longer. Like the house was truly haunted at one point, but now it's just a marketing ploy. Spirits and hauntings have always been part of human history. So is the Vicarage. Whatever the truth may be, Borgvattnet Vicarage is a piece of Swedish history. If nothing else, it does make for a very good ghost story. Or several of them, in fact. Let me know what you think. Do you think Vicarage is truly haunted? And do you have any theories of the weeping ladies? If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you all. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the video, and I'll see you in the next one.